Hello. So in this tutorial, we're going to be setting up a stagger meter for both the AI and the character. And you'll fill the meter by being damaged or giving damage to an AI. As soon as the meter is full, the owner of the meter will fall down into a down state, or you can simply just put a knockdown animation on there also. So let's go ahead and get started by going into the Dynamic Combat System folder. Go to the Blueprints folder and open the Interfaces folder. We're going to be creating a new interface here. I'm going to put it in the folder I have created for the added interfaces. So you probably won't have this folder unless you've added your own. You can just place this interface here. You can really put it anywhere you want to. This is just where I would suggest to put it. And right click in the content browser, hover over blueprints and create a blueprint interface. We're going to name this I_Stagger. Let's go ahead and open it up. Now inside here, the first function we're going to name update stagger value. And then create another function. And this one's going to be called activate stagger. You can call this knockdown instead of stagger if you'd like to, but stagger is going to be the word I'll be using throughout most of the tutorial. And that's all we need to do in here. We don't need to add any inputs or anything. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to the Dynamic Combat System Blueprints folder. We're going to open the Components folder now. And I'm going to also add a new folder here. And right click, and we're going to create a new blueprint class, and the class type is going to be actor component. And I'll name this C_stagger meter. And let's open that up. We need to erase the event tick as we won't be using it. On the event begin play, we want to right click and get owner. We're going to right click the return value here and promote it to a variable and just name it owner. That's just going to save a reference to get the owner of this component. Now we're going to create some variables. The first one will be called current value, and it's going to be a float. And the second one will be max value. Next one will be stagger value. Next one, next one is staggered. And I'm going to put a question mark on here, but you don't have to do that. And the variable type will be a Boolean. And now we're going to create a new function, and we'll name it modify value. And we're going to add an input here. The input name will just be value, and it's going to be a float. And we're going to check if this value is not equal to 0. And if it is equal to 0, we're not going to want to do anything because that means there's been no value to change the current value. And now we're going to want to drag in the current value variable. And we're going to get a float plus float. And the B pin here will plug into the value. We're going to add the value to the current value. And then we'll set our current value. And now we need to get owner. And we will update stagger value. Now this isn't going to do anything unless we first go and open up our BP combat character. And also our base AI, and we need to add the interface that we've created. We can ignore all this. So go to the class settings, and you can add the interface here. I staggered. Now let's do the same for the base AI in the AI folder here. Okay, so now they are both inheriting that interface there. So back to the component stagger meter from owner. We're going to update stagger value. Just make sure this one that says message here. We can't actually call any of the other ones from this blueprint anyway. And that's all we need to do in the component for now. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to the blueprints folder, and we're going to open up the anim notifies and find the ANS hitbox. So let's go to the received notify begin. And from the get owner here, we're going to get component by class. And the component class will be our stagger component that we just created. And let's move these aside. From the return value here, we want to set stagger value. And now let's promote this pin here to a variable, and we'll name it stagger value. And make sure you set it to instance editable. You can just click the little I here, or you can check the box up here. And now for each attack type, we'll be able to set a custom stagger value. So for your lighter attacks, you'd set a smaller value. For the heavier attacks, you'd have a higher value. And with a special attack, you'd probably have the highest value on there. It really just depends on the attack type and how much you want it to stagger. Right, now let's go to the received notify end. We're going to do the same thing here, but this time we're going to be setting the stagger value to 0. So when the hitbox ends, it clears it out. Oh, we need to set our class. Okay. Now, the next thing we're going to want to do is make the stat bar. So the quickest way to do it would be to open the widgets folder here. I'm going to add another folder. And I'm going to grab the WB stat bar. You can just duplicate it and move it to any other folder, or I can move it here, and I'm going to make sure I copy here. So I don't want to just move it, I want to copy it. Okay, now we'll name this WB Stagger bar. And I'm going to change the color here to a yellowish orange color. And let's go to the graph now. Select the initialize, or actually select the initialize custom event here. We're gonna change the name of this to Stagger component. And let's remove the get extended stat component and extended stat type, and also delete the extended stat type variable here. And now from the get owning pawn player, we can get component by class. And then select our Stagger component and plug that into the Stagger component here. We're also going to need to change the variable type here on the custom event. We're going to change that to our Stagger component, C underscore Stagger meter. And when you compile, you're going to get a couple errors, but that's fine, we'll fix it. Now you can plug the return value into the Stagger component there. Okay, so now let's erase the get current value and get max value here. And if you drag off the Stagger component, we're going to get current value and get max value again. But these ones are going to inherit from the Stagger component instead of the extended stat. And plug them into the new value as the current value, max value for the max value. And we can erase this bind event here. And let's drag off of our Stagger component variable, and we're going to add a modify value. And the value, we'll just plug in, let's see, yeah, we'll plug the current value into that. So just in case there's an enemy or the player starts not at 0, it'll update that value. Although most likely they'll always be starting at 0. Okay, I'm going to disconnect these here. I'm pretty sure it'll run either way, but I just like seeing it this way more because I feel like it's just the way it should be. Because it updates these two variables first, and then it calls the update percent, and it can pull from the variables here. It just makes more sense being that way. And then we can disconnect this one as well, and just plug the max value into that. Okay, and I don't think there's anything else we need to do here. Except, if you notice how when I change this, as soon as I compiled, it just goes back to its original color. That's because it is being pre-constructed here. And so all we gotta do is just change the fill color here instead. There we go. Okay. And now we're going to go ahead and let's go to the dynamic combat system widgets. We're going to open up the WB in-game. So we only need to add this here if you do want the player to also use the stagger meter. If you don't plan on the player having its own stagger meter to get staggered, then there's no reason to put your stagger meter in here. Because we'll also be next adding it to the AIs. Okay, now check size to content. And it's already anchored to the top left corner. Okay, so now let's go back and let's find the WB AI stat bars. And you're gonna, up here in the palette tab, we'll find our stagger bar and drag and drop it right onto the vertical box here. And select the stagger bar, and we're gonna set it to fill. And compile and save. And that's all we need to do for that one. If you don't want it to be visible, you can do the same thing that's being done here. Just duplicate this and replace stamina with the stagger bar instead. And it will collapse the stagger bar. Right now it's set to not hit testable and it's not being collapsed in the event graph, so it's going to be there. It's going to show up right underneath the health bar. Okay, next we're going to want to create an anim notify state. Actually, first, there's one more thing I need to do. You guys should already have a knockdown or stagger animation in your file. I'm going to just quickly import some. And I can include the stun idle and stun start also in the Patreon post in case you guys need them. Okay. And now first thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and turn the root motion on in all of these. Okay, we can close down some of these tabs that we don't need. Now I'm going to create a montage for the knockdown here. And I'll set that to full body. And then I'll create a montage also for the stun start. And I'm going to change the name to Stagger on ground. This isn't the best animation, but It's from one of the Paragon characters. It's from the Greystone character, I believe. So they're free to access to everyone. You just download Greystone pack from the Epic Games launcher, and you can get the animation there. Or I can also upload it as an FBX, since it is just free to everyone. I didn't have time to go and make any special animations for this, so I just found some I could use. Okay, now I'm going to grab the stun idle and drag it in here to add it to the montage. And now we've got a long, I think about 10-15 second montage. So this one will be good if you want a very long stun instead of just a short knockdown. And it's really easy to switch between. So if you want to change it at any point, it's really quite easy to change it. I'll show it in the video. Okay. Now, next thing we're going to do is create an anim notify state. So let's go to the dynamic combat system, blueprints, anim notifies. And I'm going to create mine in this folder here. So let's go ahead and create a blueprint class. In the all classes section, just search for anim notify state. And we'll name this ANS is staggered. And there's going to be 4 overridable functions, and we'll be using 3 of those. First one will be get notify name. You can just type in the name here, is staggered. Next one will be the notify begin. And from the mesh component, we're going to get owner. And then we'll get component by class. And select our stagger meter. And then we will set is staggered. And we're going to be setting it to true on the notify begin. And now highlight these 3 nodes here that we just added and copy them. Now let's override the received notify end. And we can just paste those nodes right in here. Connect the mesh component to the target of the get owner. And connect the 2 executive pins on the set node, and make sure that you on check is staggered, because we want to set it back to false at the end of this anim notify state. And that's all we need to do for this one. Now we can go back to our montage here, and I'm going to add in the ANS input buffer. And I'll add a new track. And let's also add ANS is staggered. So the input buffer, we don't actually want that long. We'll put it just right at the end. The is staggered, we want to start very close to the beginning and end just right before the ending of the input buffer. And now I'll also add this to the other animation too. Okay, the next thing we'll do is we'll open up our data tables. So dynamic combat system, data tables. And let's start with the players. So the player one-handed montage. You'll have to make sure to do this to any attack that you want to have a stagger effect. So let's open it up, and you'll notice now if we click our hitbox, it has the collision part, which was there always, and now we have this new stagger value. So I'm going to go ahead and set all the light attack stagger values to 10. And the heavy attacks, we'll set these to 30. I'll grab a drink real quick. Okay. The backstab, I'm going to leave it off on the backstab actually. Well, we don't even have a hitbox on the backstab. Damage is applied in blueprints for that one, I believe. Thrust attack. We'll put this one at 20. Falling attack, we'll put at, we'll do 20 also on that one. And for the special attack, we'll put this one to 50. Okay, now let's quickly do the same thing for the AI's one-handed montages. Or whichever data table and animations you're using. If you wanted some kind of special attack that always staggered, you could always set this amount to just a very high value. If the stagger meter ever goes above 100, we're going to be automatically setting it back to 0 after. So, because it'll initiate the stagger, and then once the stagger is initiated, it sets back to 0. Okay, next thing we're going to do, so I believe we're done with the interface now. And I think we're also done with the stagger meter component as well. So now let's go into our BP combat character. And the first thing we'll do is we'll go into the melee collision handler and view the on hit event. Okay, so we can ignore this for now. That's from the last tutorial I did. Yours is going to look just the same, besides all of this is not going to be here. So I'll kind of get that out of the way there. So what we need to do is drag off of the hit actor variable here on the break hit result and bring it over here. I've already got this one here, so I'm just going to use this. But if you drag yours over, you can just create a reroute node and work from that. So this is connected to the hit actor. And from this, we want to get component by class and select our stagger meter component. Now we're going to get is staggered. And from this, we'll get a branch. I better add my input here. Or output, I meant. So again, just ignore this part. You guys won't have that unless you've followed the weapon buff effects tutorial already, then you will have that there. So we'll just be going straight through and going to our branch. So if you don't have this, it's just going to look like this. And the reason this is here is we don't want to be able to build up the stagger meter while they're already staggered, because if you choose to have a very long stagger, then the player is able to attack the AI many times, or AI is able to attack the player many times while they're staggered. You don't want that stagger bar to fill up and have them be re-staggered before they can even get up. Now, if you do go with just a short knockdown for the stagger, you could remove this is staggered and the branch here, and have it to where you can actually build the stagger back up when they're still down on the ground. That's up to you guys to decide if you want to or not. And if is staggered is false, if they are not staggered, we're going to, from the return value here, modify value. If that's false, and the value we will modify this by will be from the player's stagger component, which we forgot to add. So let's add component and add the C stagger meter. Compile, save. Let's do the same for the AI real quick. Add component, stagger meter, and compile, save. So now we'll grab the player's stagger meter, because this one is it's going to be calling from the hit actor, the actor that the player hit, and it will get their stagger meter, and it will see if they are stunned, and then modify their value. But the value we want it to modify by is held in our player's stagger meter component, and that's going to be the stagger value. Get stagger value, and we'll plug that into the value. And remember, we're setting this variable from the anim notify state hitbox. Okay, now let's copy all of this. And hop over to our BP base AI. Go to the melee collision handler, view the on hit event, and we're going to paste the same thing here at the end. And this target will connect to the hit actor on the break hit result here. and save. Okay, so now let's go, we'll start in our BP combat character. Go to our main event graph. And just down in an empty space here, right click, and we're going to get event update stagger value. And now we'll get our stagger meter components. We're going to get our current value and get max value. We're going to check if the current value is greater than or equal to the max value. And we'll get a branch. If it is not greater than or equal to the max value, then we will get our in-game widget. And from the in-game widget, get stagger bar. And we'll call the on value changed. But if the current value is greater than or equal to the max value, that means your stagger bar is full. We'll need to make another event down here. It's going to be the event activate stagger. And for this, we're just going to be playing a montage. We'll get the mesh component here and play montage. And we'll start with just our simple knockdown first. Now we need to get our C stagger meter. I just copied it from up here. And we want to set current value to 0. So as soon as the montage plays, as soon as they're knocked back, we want to set our bar back to 0. Okay, now that we've created that event there, on our branch up here on the true, we can call that event the activate stagger. We also want to plug the output into the on value changed because we want to make sure we update that whether that was true or false, but if it was true, we'll activate the stagger and reset our current value. Now we can duplicate these 3 nodes over here and plug these into the on value changed. Current value is the new value and max into max value. Okay, and we'll go ahead and collapse these down to a collapsed graph so it looks a little better. And we'll name this stagger events. Okay. So next we're going to be doing the same thing in the base AI, but slightly different. We can go ahead and just copy this and we'll just change it as we need to. So let's go to our base AI, go to the event graph, and let's paste it in here. You can fix this name or just leave it, doesn't really matter. Now let's open up our Stagger events. Okay, so everything we need to do here is pretty much the same, except for here, the in-game widget. The AI doesn't use the in-game widget, that's only for the player. So we can't use that, we'll have to erase that. And we'll erase the on value changed. What we need to do for this one, so right when the event is called, we'll cast to AI stat bars. Oh, oops. Cast to AI stat bars. WB AI stat bars. And for our object, we can right click and get stat bars widget. And what that does is that just gets the stat bars widget up here, which is connected to our player's mesh, and that's what shows our stat bar. And from that, we will get user widget object. And we'll use this as our object for our cast node here. Now we can drag off of this and get our WB Stagger bar. And if our branch here is false, we're going to need from the WB Stagger bar the on value changed. And if it's true, we activate Stagger and also the on value changed. And let's remember to plug our values in here also. And that all looks about right. Okay, one more thing we need to do. In the base AI, let's find our melee attack function right here. And before it does anything, we're going to want to check if the AI has been staggered, so they can't try to attack the player when they're staggered. So we can just get their C stagger meter, get is staggered, and get a branch. If this is true, that means they are staggered. We don't want to do anything. If it's false, they are not staggered, and we'll have them just attack as normal. Okay, for the player, let's go to the BP combat character. We want to make sure the player can't attack while they are staggered. And an easy way to do this would just be to go to the input buffer events. And we're going to just drag all these over. And let's get our stagger meter. Check if we are staggered. It is staggered. And place our branch here. And if we are staggered, that is true. We don't want to do anything. If we are not staggered, we want to fire off our input buffer. Okay, another thing is we don't want our stagger to be interrupted by stunning the enemy if we hit them again. So let's find our can be stunned condition. And for the players, we'll just add a pin here. And let's get our stagger meter. Get is stunned. Oh, my bad, it's not stunned, it's staggered. And then we'll want a not boolean, because we want to make sure they are not stunned, as well as not falling or not being backstabbed. And then just plug that into the and boolean there. Now let's go to the BP base AI. And we also want to find the can be stunned condition. And for this one, we're going to add an or boolean on this branch here. And we're not going to allow them to be stunned if they're being backstabbed or if they're being stunned. So we can get our C stagger meter and get is stunned. My bad, staggered. And I think we've got everything in there now. So let's go ahead and test it out quickly. Oh. Alright, so you'll notice now the AI has that little bar underneath their health bar. That's our stagger meter. Which is not filling up. They are getting staggered, but every time, so there's definitely something wrong here. I must have missed a step somewhere. Let's see, I believe it was something in the component that we forgot to do. So let's find our C stagger meter. So we want our current value set to 0 by default. Our max value, we're going to set to 100 by default. Stagger value would be 0, is staggered false. Okay, so that our max value not being set to 100 was what our problem was. And you'll see the player has their own stagger bar also in the top left corner with the health bars up there. If you go to the BP combat character, Select the stagger meter here and increase their max value, let's say 250. You'll see that should actually increase their bar also. It increases the size of it. And you can turn that off easily by just unchecking size to content in the in-game widget. Same thing with the other health bars. They all work the same way. So let's put this back to 100. And now let's test it out again. There we go. So we see our little stagger meter fills up every time we hit them. Our heavy attacks will fill it much more. Our special attack will fill it like halfway. And it knocks them down. We can continue attacking them and they don't get stunned. Now let's check that it's working for our player. Oh, so he's not using the one-handed data table, so he's not able to stagger me since we haven't added any values to the punching. But we can do that real quick. Just go to our data table and it's DT player U montages. That's the one he's using. We'll go to our light attack and add 10. Heavy attack. We'll set that one to 30. And that should be all that he'll use. You can also set it on the following attack, I guess, in case the player's using it. We'll do 20. So now he should be able to stagger me. There we go. So you see our little stagger bar filling up there. And now we can't move or attack until we get back up. So right now, if we block, they don't receive any stagger. So you'll see he's still taking damage because he doesn't have a shield. So he's only blocking a very small amount with his fists like that. But he's not receiving any stagger from it. And same thing with the player. If we're blocking, we're not going to receive any more stagger. We're still receiving damage since we're blocking with our weapon. The weapon doesn't block 100%. You'll notice we never receive any stagger if we're blocking. You can leave it that way. I guess if you're blocking, you've got your guard up, you shouldn't be stunned really. But if you want to be able to add the stagger when they are blocking still, what you can do is go to your melee collision handler. Let's go to our on hit event. And right after the take damage interface call right there, we can move this stuff over a little. You can drag off the result type and switch on E attack result. And on success, it will plug into the apply hit and pulse and fire the rest. On failed, we'll do nothing. And on blocked, you could also add some cool things here like spark effects. You can plug the location into the hit location or impact point. And you can have some sparks on a shield when you hit it. But we can also plug that into our code over here if we want to be able to be staggered. So I'll go ahead and do that real quick just so we can see an example of it. So we'll skip all of that. And we'll go straight to our branch. With the weapon buffs also, that's something people would probably want to add because you may want the weapon effect to go through the shield. You wouldn't take damage and you wouldn't get a impulse or get a stun effect. But, you know, if you had poison, maybe you'd want it to go through the shield. It depends. Okay, and so now we can still apply our effect even if they blocked. You can do the same thing also on the base AI if you want the player to take stun also when they block. I'm not going to do it because it's the same exact thing as doing it here. You could also do it, I guess, if you parried the attack, which probably is not ideal because if you parried it, you shouldn't take stun from that. So we'll just do it on the blocked. And now even if he blocks my attack, he'll still take that stagger amount. Okay. So I realized there that he didn't actually get his stagger applied to him. I think I know why it happened. So in our stagger montages here, let's put this is staggered all the way right on the start there. So the moment that starts, it's already on. I think he attacked in that very brief moment there. I hadn't noticed it when I was testing it earlier because I was using the sword attacks and it was much slower. So it was less likely to happen. Okay, let's also test this out with our stagger on ground montage. You could also promote this to a variable so you can easily change the montage they play when they're knocked down. Or you can check some kind of condition here and play a specific montage depending on any condition you want. I'm going to go ahead and plug that in on both of these. Now he's staggered there for a while. We can sit here and wail on him until he's dead. Or with a boss enemy, you know, they have an extremely high amount of health. You'd be very much waiting for that time when they get staggered so you have a chance to get some heavy attacks in there. Alright, now we'll let him stagger us. And he'll probably kill us right after he does. And now we're stuck here. We can't attack, we can't do anything. And he killed us. So that one might be a bit too long. Maybe you can shorten it a little bit. Cut maybe 5 or 10 seconds off of the end of it. Or any animations that you have made, you can just plug them right into it. It will work with any of them. As long as you have the is staggered notify placed on your montage, that's all you need to make the montage work with it. The input buffer also, if the character's using it, is nice sometimes because right at the end you can hit the input and kind of save your input there. And actually I think you need to have the input buffer on any montage the player uses, or else it can break the inputs. So both of those are going to be necessary to have on here. Yeah, this one's way too slow. All right, that's everything for this video. So thanks for watching, guys, and I hope it's helpful to you. Have a nice day.